Hey friends, welcome to my house. This is Ask Robin Black, episode 2. I don't know if we're changing the name or not. Used to be hashtag Ask Robin Black, one long word. Now it's 3 words. So maybe that's changed enough. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. Well, thank you for joining me. We've been in a art gallery for a few days. We're back there tomorrow. Sometimes we'll be in my home. I don't want to get too much into it. Lots of people to thank and lots to update. But this is Ask Robin Black, and we take questions and try to flush them out in ways that we can learn something from studying the martial arts that apply to everyday life. Tomorrow we will do another Fighting is About Fighting. I have lots of people to thank. I have lots of updates. We probably got a stripe on our white belt already, for real. This is day number 1 of week 2. I was just about to get into it, but I will tell you tomorrow, Fighting is About Fighting. Depending on when you're watching this, maybe it's already up. But it has been a very, very amazing week. We just got Mark Manoharan here and myself. And a friend has gathered the questions online. I'll tell you about that after. But I have learned a lot about life and adapting and learning and growing, and that is the theme we like to apply, the lens that we like to look at these questions through. I've really enjoyed this type of podcast, this question and answer, and I've really, my interest and my curiosity has really moved towards big picture philosophical things, and how the martial arts teaches us those things and how they create new questions in us for these things. So I've been really excited to do this all day. So I guess, week 2, this is episode 2. Let's get into one. Thanks for sending the questions. It's hashtag Ask Robin Black. This is from Glenn Williamson, at Glenn Williamson. Ask Robin Black, as MMA continues to evolve and grow, which aspect do you feel is the next evolution within the sport? That question is a question that should, and you should yourself ask forever. Because the answer to this, as it applies to the next 15 weeks, will be already different 2 weeks from now, and 8 weeks from now, and of course 15 weeks from now. And it is watching and being part of the river of change of fighting that's allowing us to see that everything in life is like that. It isn't just that an underhook doesn't work the same way as it used to when everybody understands how to squash it. Or it isn't just that the double pump jab doesn't work anymore because everybody knows what you're doing and when I say doesn't, these are very big generalizations, something we're trying to avoid. So I'm already sort of getting angry at myself for that. But it is always changing. So I think and it's something we're always going to talk about, because it's relevant every week. There's something else. A few key people at the top are doing it, and we're not in a little group of people who are noticing it. Coaches are noticing it. Other fighters are noticing it. Training partners of theirs are trying it. You go into a gym, you didn't even watch the fights for the last couple of months. You've been so busy training and cutting weight and whatever, but your training partners have. And so it's going to affect you. You're going to feel it and taste it and understand something is different. That's always going to happen, and it's always going to happen in life. It's going to happen in your job, and it's going to happen in your business relationships. It's going to happen in your personal relationships. Life, everything is a river. It's moving. It's constantly changing. And if you stand on the shore for any length of time, it's gone. You have to be part of that river. You have to get in it, swim in it, get comfortable in it. Because it's not what we say, oh my God, it's going to be karate. That's not the point. Holy shit. The next thing you know, people are starting to use more and more limb destruction. The point isn't, at this point, as you're watching the river go by, what is it going to be? The point is understanding it's ever changing, always, forever. So is everything around you, including you. And the more you allow yourself to be part of that constant change, and that you don't get completely disrupted or freaked by it or shook by it, and you do get shook. Of course you're going to get shook. But each time it's a little easier, This is week 2. This is a lot easier, It is. It's exciting. So let's start with a few concepts. Let's hang out in this question for a while as it relates to fighting and as it relates to everything. Technology? just what we have here. And the thing you're watching this on, if you're watching it on this, I'm reading the questions off of this. That's normal now. 8 years ago, this wasn't even a thing. I had one of those phones that you had to click and pull that thing up. And that was 1997. What is that? Holy shit, that's 20 years ago. Okay, that's a long time. So, okay, this has been around for a while now. But you don't have to be that old. You don't have to go to ask your dad. You don't have to ask your grandfather before this. The first cell phone I was ever exposed to, and I was well into my later 20s, was a guy had a suitcase of it, and he pulled the thing out and talked on it. It blew our minds. And whatever will be the contact lens that replaces this, so that you can just play with whatever as you're going through the world, or whatever it'll be, the VR stuff. And as I'm stepping out into, digital stuff and talking to people who are interested in different things that we work on, VR keeps coming up. Now, right now, as I have conversations with people about digital fight stuff, and VR, 360, all of this stuff is in the conversation. Two of the guys you're going to get to know, Aaron and Morgan, that if you saw my breakdown or the version of it that we did this week, that's Aaron and Morgan. They're artists. Where they work, they are surrounded by all that future. They're closing in on 30 now, or they are 30. They're not 17. How could they learn that? You just have to grow. You have to evolve. And that's what we're talking about here, whether we're talking about what Stephen Thompson will do to change, or we're talking about what Habib will do to change. This is... all of us are doing this. Fighting is just a microcosm of how you're going to get through technological change, the change in culture, the change in the work environment. When there's, I know I'm gone on a tangent, but this is what we do here. You signed up for this. When technology changes, driverless cars are happening in Pittsburgh right now. Uber is doing driverless cars all over the place. And Uber is not set up to give you a job forever. Uber is set up so that people can transition until they work driverless cars. All these jobs will be affected. Are we going to freak out? And are we going to say, we liked it better when the double leg takedown worked? We liked it better when we trained like Matt Hughes and we used to be able to beat everybody. No, we're going to accept the reality of the change. The double leg takedown doesn't work like it used to. And we're either going to adapt, learn the new thing, grow with it, accept that reality, or we're going to lose and get hurt and fail. And the double leg takedown not working the same way, and the single barely works at all. And that it has to do with Renan Barão and Jose Aldo. They penalized you for daring to. They'd offer you that single. They wanted you to take it. And the double, now you go in to shoot, and it used to be, well, you got sprawled on, or, we defended the takedown, and that was the end of that. That's not the case anymore. Now, when you shoot on Tony Ferguson and he drives back, he's attacking you. So you didn't just go from standing in a somewhat even scenario out in the open. You entered into a place that the penalty is no longer just takedown got stuffed. The penalty is I've now entered an arena of danger that I didn't want to be in, with my face down and his sternum on the back of my back, attacking any series of things. That's a reality. So you have to adapt to it. Uber and driverless cars is going to be a reality. So by studying how these fighters change, and by studying how the art itself changes, the coaches change, the combat changes, the athlete changes, we can apply those things. That's all real. It's all there for us to look at. But I think to do that, we have to step back a little bit, and we start at the fundamental root. And it was I'd heard this basic concept plenty in my life, but David Mullins, who I do the mentality of fighting sports, or whatever that is called, he really introduced it to me early on when we used to spend time doing podcasts together and talking, which sent me to books like Growth and a number of different books. There's lots on the topic, a ton. But it is the difference between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. The fixed mindset is... And when I was talking with a friend today who works in television, Jamil, and we were talking about, he goes, well, if you are an outside fighter, you do this, but if you are a close-in fighter, or it's like if you are a wrestler, or if you are a striker, those are limiting concepts. None of those things are real. Those things, you might feel a certain way in there, or you find comfort in fighting in close or fighting all the way out or whatever, but those are limiting concepts that you've taken on, concepts that you have applied to yourself. That's what a fixed mindset is. I am what I am, And that's what I am. How good of a guitar player are you? Oh, I don't play guitar. You don't play guitar yet. You know? If you say, I don't play guitar, you've limited yourself. Or you're like, hey, man, I am first day white belt in guitar. Because that's what you really are if you don't play guitar. You're just not a guitar player, or you're a shitty artist, or I'm not very good at math, or, yeah, I'm a little overweight. All those things are only true right now. The actions that you take change all those things. Always. That's the growth mindset, is wherever we apply effort and study and focus, we will grow. Growth mindset is I am what I am today. I am what I am right now. What I am in 20 minutes will change based on my willingness to accept new information, study something, practice something. If you practice anything in the world, you will get better at it. And once you understand that, you have, and that then extrapolate that onto, once I identify a weakness, I can then identify how to improve that weakness. These are basic, fundamental building blocks of evolving as a human being. Something that the only rule that we have around here is that you have to do that. That is the only rule we have. You can do whatever you want otherwise, but you have to evolve as a human being. Or else you just have to. There's nowhere else. You have to. I think it was Ask Robin Black. We have done a lot of sitting and talking recently, which has been a pleasure. Really fun to think these ideas out. But in one of our conversations in the past week, I was like, you don't have to do anything. And there are no rules. And I stand by that with this one exception. You must try to get better at something, learn something, or improve something. You have to. That is what it is to be a person. And so once you apply that idea, now we've applied the idea that, whenever I hear somebody, oh, McGregor sucks on the ground, or man, Ronda is a terrible boxer. Right now, if she believes she's a terrible boxer, which she doesn't, maybe she should, but for now, because she will progress it. And if that isn't working with the right amount of training, change the training. If the particular applied coaching isn't quite right, we're going to change that. If I'm doing the wrong drills, if I'm not focused enough, we're going to improve our ability to focus. But we can improve everything. So that's why I do an analysis as you analyze fighting or anything. Applying these fixed concepts is limiting to you. It's limiting to your analysis. You are disrespecting the fighter and the coach and the future, because unless we either imply or somehow state that whenever we're describing these fighters, or you know it just by knowing the person talking, and we say, oh man, this guy's got a killer right hook. Or, he gets caught often against the cage in this way. Right now he does. 6 weeks ago, in that last fight he did, or he used to, but you don't know what they're doing right now. It's change. Everything's changing. So the individual changes, your ability to improve yourself, your ability to, by applying focus and effort and coaching and feedback. And there's a particular, it's called deliberate practice. We'll get into that more another time. We have talked about it before, but practice is great, but practicing a bad golf swing forever is not. But deliberate practice with feedback and the effort to keep improving this, there are, these things are skills, but they can be acquired. So the individual can do that with anything. And the individual often does that based on things that they see. It's not uncommon. We all do it. We try not to. Our ancestors saw somebody stick a stick down an anthole and eat all the ants. They all learned to do it. And then that individual died, and the young ones taught it to the next one. And we do it all the time. We're doing it every day. When we use the same terminology as we saw Joe Rogan use, and then we can't help it sometimes. Joe's the best. We've been listening to him forever. We end up emulating what we've seen. And the goal is to not do that. But sometimes fighters and coaches, that happens. It's natural. It's going to happen. And that's how waves of ideas happen. When suddenly everybody has a turning sidekick. 7 years ago, or before that first one, Terry Adam got caught Barbosa. I think it was Barbosa. And then all of a sudden, spinning hook kick is real again. I mean, the front kick doesn't work in fighting. Maybe 10 years ago or less? Anderson Silva, boom, Franklin. Of course the front kick works in fighting. but we need sometimes to see it to believe it. So that happens, and then the living, breathing organism that is fighting itself moves and changes, as does technology, as does music. And by the way, I've taken my records out of here after good advice from people. I love my records, and so these are just the sleeves because I also like that, because I don't want to warp them. But music changes that way. I mean, why does every song that you hear on basic radio, it has similar beats, it has a similar rhythm, they treat the vocals the same? This shit like that just moves in waves. What we want from it changes, then therefore those that make it change, etc. So this, I know I've taken a long time to kind of lay out some of the things that we've learned over the last while, and some of which we've shared in Ask Robin Black before. But it's taken me to a, now we've got the basis of where some of this philosophical view comes from. And now the next question is, what is the next thing? And I think I could and have at different times said, well, once we see all these guys kicking and they're kicking at distance and it's difficult, you're going to see an improved ability to catch kicks. Logical, we see it. And you can keep doing that, and we can keep doing that. And we will. I will, others will, you will. We'll be able to look and gather information about what we see happening in fighting, and then be able to make and anticipate some of the things that adaptations that will happen to work, to be able to make that work. We can do that. So we could do that right now based on what we're seeing, or we can go in and look at the general concepts that allow you to be able to make some of these, to anticipate some of these adaptations. So one of the general concepts of how and why fighting will react and fighters will react to certain things is when we're doing a lot, when something works, the global we of fighters, coaches, etc., and we tend to do it a lot. And we really go down that road, which is why when George St. Pierre was a very ultra fit, well-rounded fighter, all of a sudden, everybody kind of started to look like George. The double leg takedown, the overhand right, a heavy focus on strength and conditioning, etc. Once it works, everybody goes, oh man, I got to be able to make that work, and they all train it. And that makes sense. But the pendulum will swing very, very hard. And so Chad Mendes, I love watching Chad Mendes fight. Chad Mendes is a prototype of when you go down a road of a fantastic power wrestler that you teach to strike, and you muscle him up and you build his body in a particular way. He's just a little George St. Pierre, and as was Ben Henderson during that period, and even Frankie while he was the champ, although much more mobile and stuff. It was all the same principle. So you look at the things that are working and how far they go, and the antidote and the answer to them is generally opposite-ish. Okay, so that's why all of when McGregor started to see, I see he's stiff, I see there's no mobility, there's no movement. Everybody was muscled up, strong, linear, explosive. McGregor and I was going to say I'm not being a McGregor nut hugger. I guess I am. I guess I am. I'm using him as an example, as he took out the best featherweight in the world in 13 seconds, and then took out one of the greatest lightweights of all time in an unbelievable fight. He started being about fluidity, with strong, everything smashing through the wall. Instead, we'll let it go by. We won't use as much power. We'll be less powerful, although there are many ways to generate power, but less raw power and more fluid, power through movement, power through physics, power through fluidity, right? So, and that's a natural thing. Now a lot of people are doing that. So just this morning, I was at Bang Fitness, and which is a place that I go and I try to take these basic concepts that'll apply to all of us. If you do a lot of deadlifts and improve the technique, improve the skill, sleep properly, you will get better at deadlifts. The great thing about working out in a gym like that and doing that, even if it's one small thing, is you have the undeniable truth. When you used to be able to bench press 120 pounds, and now 4 months later, you're sturdier, stronger, and you do 160 pounds, and it's been written down, you have undeniable truth of the idea of the growth mindset. It's proven. It's just sitting right there. I also just love training there because I like the people and I like moving my body, and they help customize me so that If I'm studying Demetrius Johnson, I'm studying Dominic Cruz, we start working agility work and with a long-term idea so I can physically understand it. So they help me that way. But I was there this morning, and Jeff, who is one of the owners, or the owner, the founder, he was in there training, and there's these two older gentlemen. I think they're like in their 60s, but they seem like they're in their 40s. And they are going over to Asia to compete in the World Push Hands Championship. And if you're not familiar with push hands, it is an extension of Tai Chi. That is the combat form of Tai Chi. If you want to read an amazing book related to that, Josh Waitkin's The Art of Learning. Unbelievable book. And it was one of the viewers that turned me on to it. And he was a chess champion. I was going to say prodigy. We'll talk about that later. There's sort of no such thing. It just means you started practicing earlier. But he was a chess world champion as a young man. And then later you applied many of those same principles of learning to become a push hands world champion. It's a great, unbelievable book. It's an unbelievable listen, too. I recommend it highly. I love it as a listen. You walk and listen to it, or you work out and listen to it. But so these two gentlemen are training to go compete in the senior division of the World Push Hands Championships. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of push hands too much, but essentially, there is a standing version where you are just trying to, like when you're kids and you're playing King of the Mountain, only it's equal. You're trying to make each other move their feet. Or the moving version, which is essentially wrestling without touching the legs, trying to throw a guy down or push him out off of the platform or out of the ring. And both Jeff and I forget the man's name, is a sweet, wonderful, cool man that makes me think that when I'm in my mid to late 60s, that I'd like to be like him. You meet a lot of cool people in your life, and you should, if you see people doing awesome things, start to see if you can learn something from them. It's another one of those mandatory things you just have to do. But they were working on it, and so I come over, and they were hilarious. They were like, because I started commentating it, right? I was done my workout, and I started basically commentating some of the concepts. Essentially, we're working with push and pull, but it's basically a sensitivity to pressure and your ability to manipulate the pressure of somebody else. And at a base level where somebody very good, you try to push and you go flying, or they push and you resist too hard and then they pull. It's a push and a pull. And it is a developed sensitivity. And there's movement, and there's positions, and there's choices, but ultimately it is that manipulation of sensitivity. So when you watch, I'm going to digress, but I'll bring it back. When you watch black belts at a jiu-jitsu tournament, it's often not as exciting. It is if you are a nerd and you're studying it on a higher level. But to the average viewer, it is not as exciting as the blue belts, because the blue belts are rolling for all kinds of crazy shit. They have weaknesses in their defensive systems. They can't hold on to positions the same way. The black belts are moving often, and it is a game of subtlety. Their sensitivity to each other's direction and destabilization and tricks is so high that they are playing a micro game. And the more you study things like that, the more fascinating it is. When you understand it, it becomes more interesting. And we will often come back to this idea, because I really want you to be able to see Wonder Boy versus Woodley and know there's something beautiful happening there, because there is something beautiful happening there. And so push hands, very much the same thing. And so average person or half decent martial artist, somebody who's trained martial arts, goes in with one of them, and they'll just slowly, might take them a few extra pushes and pulls and pressure and angles, but essentially they'll destabilize you. On each other, it can be very subtle. It can be highly brutal, but it is a beautiful little martial art. And I was watching that today, and I was watching these guys do it, and so I started throwing some of these ideas out. And they're literally like, we'd normally have to be like a sheik to be able, in the Middle East, to be able to have somebody just sit here and commentate our push hands practice, which I took as it's just the kind of shit I really like. So it was fascinating. But you start to take any of these things, and that ability to kind of pressure, make you push back, that exists in judo, that exists in wrestling, it exists in all the cage fighting. Fighting against the cage. And I think that is an element we will see people start to build. And why, among other things? Because we're stacked. We have our 20 hours a week that our body can handle. But we also have active recovery or active rest. And active rest is a less demanding work. It's training, it's mental, It is technical, but it's not as hard on your body. And we could practice push hands. That's one little thing. That's one. There's many. Basically, the answer isn't push hands is the answer. The answer is all of these things that people are not training is the answer. Okay? So I'm in your guard, and I'm working in your guard. That's Wing Chun. You know, you see Tony Ferguson playing with a Wing Chun dummy, but basically striking and moving in directions and getting inside and playing from the inside of the weapons and the outside. It's, again, pushing and pulling, direction, manipulation. That's fighting in somebody's guard. I don't use the term ground and pound because it's an umbrella that prevents deeper discussion. In football, they don't just go, you know, he ran the ball. They did 20 years ago. Oh, it's a run play. Now it would be a description of what happened that within this concept of running. Ground and pound, it's like, oh, and we're going to dish out some ground and pound. Well, there's a whole world of martial arts going on down there, and some people understand it on a very high level. Greg Jackson, Firas, a lot of these guys have taken that. And if you were a fighter and you aren't understanding how complex that game is, and again, that ability to develop that touch to it, it's not just brutal, it's an art. If you aren't exploring that, you're in trouble. If you are exploring that, why wouldn't you go and there are still many, many other things out there. And we became very arrogant as martial artists in some of that golden era of mixed martial arts, where it is boxing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Muay Thai. That's it. That is the biggest load of shit. That is arrogant. We all did it, all of us that were passing through that time and as people passed up to it. But it is literally exactly the thing that mixed martial arts was supposed to be counteracting. The doctrines of martial arts. You have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this. And mixed martial artists and no-holds-barred fighter are like, are you crazy? If you think you have to do this, now you have all of these openings. As you're stuck in a world where that only exists, I am going to smash your face in. There were these doctrines, these outlines, these overly structured things that martial arts all became, and there's many reasons. Some of them are political, some of them are financial. It's easier to give belts to kids as you get older, whatever. But they became these overly structured things. And mixed martial arts was like, oh my God, all this stuff is overly structured, so we can work outside of it. And then somehow we all just did exactly the same thing. With this is how we throw these punches. A low kick must be this way. The front kick doesn't work. You can't spin kick something. Never do this. Always do this. You must have an underhook. Must have an underhook. There are huge advantages to an underhook, but if the guy that I'm underhooking has spent all his time training an overhook and training to manipulate me with the overhook, and I always think this wins, I'm in trouble. All of those, there are fundamentals, there are truths. If I hit you, it hurts. If I grab you, this happens. Gravity works this way. Time is real. Blood in your eye. There are truths, and then there are these rules, structures, and constructs and doctrines, and mixed martial arts is just as guilty as anybody else for maybe more, because they had this open field where we could have all done whatever we wanted. And by 2012, there were books written as if this is all of it. And as soon as you think that, Dean Thomas is over there doing that thing, and Greg Jackson's been playing in the lab for a long time, and he's thrilled you think it's only this way, and you must counter this, and always put your foot. He's thrilled because even if that was true, that there is an advantage to putting my foot on the outside when fighting a southpaw or when fighting as a southpaw against an orthodox, that is not true forever, because you behave a certain way. The martial arts is about finding the advantage. You got a straight line. I'm southpaw, you're orthodox. I got a straight line for my fist. Great. Now he knows that is one of the things. Within the reality, what he knows that I believe to be advantages, he's now going to penalize me for those, because that's how martial arts work. So what's the answer to the next thing? Is it karate? Is it push hands? It's all these things. It's all of them. It's anything that isn't being currently studied will work. Kung Fu doesn't work in the cage. Well, now you see crescent kicks, and now everything works. It's free fighting. So if anybody if there are doctrines being trained, overly structured training methodologies happening in any gym, you're going to beat that gym by thinking outside of those lines. So I think that was one question, but it is fun to sit here with you guys. I try not to slurp, but then when I think about it, I almost do, and it's strange. Do you think, if I say don't think of the pink elephant, what comes in your mind? I think I only answered one question, and I think it's half an hour. And if you're still with me, thank you for hanging. It is my pleasure to sit here and think these things out loud. And I hope that I get some feedback. And, the questions are great. I've got 10 or 12 of them. I have a feeling we won't get to all those today. I'm not going to keep you here for hours. Although if you're listening on SoundCloud, we might try to have this up on iTunes and Stitcher. If it is not yet, know that we'll be doing that soon. But maybe depending on what you're doing, you do have 2 hours in you. I don't know. I got a text from John Ramdeen. Should I read it out loud and not even think about it? I better not do that. Okay, so let's look at another question. Okay, so this question is from the Akasambo. Now, the Akasambo has been somebody who has participated in this ongoing study and conversation with me right from day one of this show, and well before that, as we were doing research and study on fighting and sharing ideas. And he's asked some of the best questions, or many or most of the best questions. So I put it out on social media. There's been a lot of people helping us with so many things. I'll touch on it on Fighting is About Fighting tomorrow, because that's our weekly check-in to give you the update on documenting our journey here from white belt to black belt in the art of sharing ideas. I don't know what we're actually, I was going to say podcasting and making stuff, but I don't think that's it either. We got to figure out what it is we're doing here. But we'll do that tomorrow. So there'll be a lot of people to thank. But I do want to thank Akasambo, because a lot of people did reach out and said, let me help you organize these questions, because they come in on Twitter, and that's a task that takes time. And I thank everybody that offered, but the Akasambo said, I'd like to do that. And because he's been there, or she, I don't know, the Akasambo, I think it's he. Because he's been there from the beginning and contributed so much, not only to the conversation, but even to making me think, which is helping me flesh out ideas. I'm honored to have him gather these for us. And he has another great question. Do you think that working as an artist in the music industry has helped you view and analyze fighting and martial arts from a more creative point of view? Okay. I'm going to add onto that, and we'll answer these two together, so because it could take another 30 minutes. At Adam Ripa, you mentioned a number of times how martial arts translates to other areas of life. How has your experience in music translated, if at all, to other areas? What were the main influences, factors shaping how you view fighting and analyze fights? Okay, so let's work on that together. I'm going to use my own path in there, but I'm also going to try to generalize it. And because we're not here talking about the stuff I've learned, we're trying to find patterns in how people walk through their path, and the things that they learn, and the challenges that they find, and the way that they overcome it, and how they deal with those things. So, I can share an idea or two of my experience, but also any artists that I've seen. Also, I want to mention, I didn't plan on doing interview segments on our YouTube channel, but I've already done one, and I want to call them Artists of Life, because I've started to see, and this is something, a lot of these ideas, a lot of the direction of where this study goes comes from gathering some of Bruce Lee's study. And Bruce Lee was very purposeful in not being a guru. That was really important to Bruce Lee. What was important to him was sort of opening up a door and seeing if you wanted to walk through it, or showing you many options and having you try to find the answer. Bruce Lee didn't set out to try to teach you anything. He set out to create curiosity in you and teach you over time, see if he could point you in the direction of some tools to be able to get better at learning. That's what he ultimately, I think, intended to do as, you know, a historical figure who died in his 20s, but still, you know, really did some very interesting things as a martial artist and as an artist of life. And that's what I was going to get at. That's what we called that series. We have one. I'm going to talk to an artist friend coming up, and then Michael Landsberg, who is a television guy. He said he would, you may know him from arguing with Chael and or CM Punk, or from his work for 25 years in television, and maybe 30, and maybe 35. I don't know. Mike still looks young, but he could be older, in television in Canada. And so that's been his art. So what I'm getting at is, as you keep studying these things and you study painting or music or fighting or anything, and this is, I consider most things art. You'll have a hard time convincing me that golf is not art. I am not a golfer, but I see people trying to be in that state to express their game the way that they want it, and changing the way that they move their body to be able to strike that ball and paint a picture and a story on that golf course, and take in the beauty of the day and have that change the way that, to me, all of that kind of thing is art. And it affects you. Imagine how spending 25 years of learning how to perfect a golf swing, if you can't apply what you've learned about your own improvement and your own study and your own repetition and your own trials and setbacks and reaction to setbacks, if you can't apply that to other things in life, that's sad. You should be able to. Tiger Woods, he may have cheated on his wife, but I'm sure he found many things in the study of golf that applied to other areas of his life. He maybe screwed up a little bit in the personal area, but I'm sure he's still working on that. So the study of music, or the study of painting, or the study of design, or the study of, and I'll go out and say math or technology, all of these things, you're looking for patterns, you're chunking information, you're getting better at the act of getting better. You're improving your ability to improve your ability. So I always look at it that way. And if you get better at anything, you've improved, you have one more time reinforced your ability to get better at anything. You've also developed systems that are in place that can be applied to other things. So that is my general answer, not for myself and music, but for all of these things. The ability to study and improve one thing applies to everything. That goes back to the very first thing we talked about with a growth mindset, but it is the simple root of being able to try to get better at something or change your life or improve something. There's no book that's going to do it. There's no thing you can listen to. There's no seminar you're necessarily going to go to and rah, and get hypnotized. You're going to work with that fundamental truth that whatever you work at, you can get better at. And when you try and you fail, you'll learn something. And then you'll use that failure, invest in that failure to do it right next time. Those are the fundamental truths. I wish it was easier than that. Or I wish there was some hack. You know, so I digress. So music itself, the business of music, you're forced to learn about business in life. You're forced to learn. Sometimes there's a scene in Star Trek, and I'm not a big Trekkie, but this is a very famous scene, where Captain Kirk has to go in and take this one test, and that you fail no matter what. And the test is there to make you fail. And then they study your reaction to the failure and see how you fail. And so he went in and reprogrammed the machine so he could win. That's business. If you can go in, that at least is what you're seeking when you're trying to understand the structures of the world that you're stuck in, okay? You don't have to do that. That is a level of control that maybe you're going to that is deeper than you should. But when you're when you're learning these lessons, you're learning about the machine itself. So the music industry was a wild machine, and a lot of the same things I learned applied to television, and it applied to the fight business. So there's that. And that would be the minimum for me. The maximum, the big thing is creativity itself is also a skill. The ability to be creative, to communicate ideas, to take risks in the things that you do, take risks in the things that you say, that's all attached to creativity. And going through a world where decisiveness. decisiveness and creativity together are a great thing, because you could do something really creative, and a lot of people have, and it's sitting in their room, or it's sitting in their brain, or it's sitting in their computer, and you don't see it. Decisiveness and the combination of creativity, decisiveness to do something with it, and no fear of ridicule. The art world, if you're lucky, helps remove the fear of failure and ridicule. Why do we not do things? Why do we not do a lot of things? Somewhere in there we're afraid. What are we afraid of? At the root, it's probably letting down our mom, or being laughed at by our friends, or failing miserably. And failure itself is a valuable thing. But if you assign meaning to failure, and it's always meaning that is way worse than the real thing. Oh my God, everyone's going to laugh at me. I'm going to lose my job. My wife's going to leave me if I fail. I'm going to get kicked out of my apartment. I'll never recover. Like, all that shit isn't real. None of that shit is real. Writing a thing and putting it out on Medium, or making a video and putting it on the internet, or asking that girl out on a date and you're afraid. Failing any of those things only helps you get better at them in the future. You have to move towards the fear of that thing. Also, moving towards the fear gets you better at moving towards the fear in the future. And it teaches you that failure is not only not that bad, but it also allows you to fail, which gives you tools to make it less likely that you'll fail next time. So that came from the music business, which I got the experience of being able to be in. But it comes from any business. But then the art of those things, I just realized it's been 1 week now. And I realized this week, as Mark literally, podcasting is his art. That's what he wants to do. That's what he's interested in doing. Whether it's the sharing of the message, the putting the thing, the packaging it all together, all of those things. That's what his art is. And you haven't necessarily met them. I've mentioned them, Aaron and Morgan. They're artists. They're drummers. They're played in big bands that also are graphic artists, and also are video artists, and also are idea guys, and also they're artists. And so if you saw the breakdown video, that's the first one that I'm building with Aaron. Morgan is going to work on Fighting is About Fighting tomorrow, so we can show you what we're doing. And then if you look at some of our other videos and where we'll be tomorrow, we're in Play Dead. We're surrounded by art. Stu is a longtime artist. I'm going to do Artist of Life with him. But we're immersed in art now. So when left to my own devices and outside of a corporate environment, I suddenly realized that my perspective, and this isn't a perspective, this is the truth. Martial arts are an art form, and the fight itself is a piece of art. And the moments in the fight are artistic expression. That is a truth. That is not some weirdo's perspective. That is the truth. If Meryl fucking Streep doesn't see that, that's her problem. She's just not understanding the truth of art. But that is the truth. And so when left to my own devices, suddenly, I'm bringing fighting. There's no fists and battle axes and tinfoil shirts and bros and whatever in the environment we're doing this. Suddenly we're surrounded by music. There's a tattoo artist at Stu's. There's a hairdresser. They're doing yoga over there right now. A bunch of Parkdale freaks are doing yoga at Stu's place. We're bringing fighting into that environment, and that environment is going to inspire the way and color the way we look at fighting. The music that I grew up making, the music that Aaron and Morgan made, Mark's artistic bent on communication, all of that. Fighting, you're never going to have seen fighting immersed in an artistic perspective like you are over the next few weeks and months, because that's what, when left to my own devices, and that's how I'm presenting it. I've never been happy as a fan and a passionate fight consumer with the way that fighting has been offered up to us. It's been a very closed-minded, very singular, one or two or three very simple perspectives of how fighting has been given to us. I don't have to do any of that now, and you don't either. So that's the road we're going down, and so in the next few months, we don't know where we're going to get to, but fighting is an art, and that is how we are presenting it. That is one of the fundamental roots of what we're doing here. And I just got myself really excited. Okay, you know what we're going to do? I think we're going to do 2 more of these. No, maybe 3. Actually, I've got quite a few good questions. Hang in there with me. I appreciate it. I do. This has been a real gift, man. This show itself, I can't believe how different a mindset I'm in from a week ago today, and how much has changed. Again, I want to talk about it and tell you all the things, but we will tomorrow. Fighting is about fighting. That's its own thing. If anything, we may be almost so free of limitations that we're trying so many ideas, but that will continue for a while. So I hope that you let us know the things you like and the things you don't. And thank you for the support. I'm going to take a sip of coffee if you're not watching this. Like if you're listening and you're like, what is that? That is coffee. In my Joe Rogan mug. Joe's been super supportive. Brandon Schaub, too. Brandon, you said some nice things about me, brother. I will try to live up to them as best I can. Okay. I'll do this one out of order, Mark, just so you know. I think it says Lucha Bone. My vision is not great. What is a good age to introduce your child to martial arts? I don't know if you picked that up. That is my dog, Pluto. He is an asshole. But I love him. He's a stinky old weirdo, just like his dad. What is a good age to introduce your child to martial arts? Oh man, this is great. So I mentioned child prodigies. Josh Waitkins was a chess child prodigy, and you ask them and you study the life of Tiger Woods or any of these guys, and there is an explanation. There is such a thing as natural talent, and genetics are real, but the deliberate practice is the thing that shapes us. And if you get a 4-year-old swinging a golf club hundreds of hours a week, particularly if he migrates to it, he or she, if you can find the thing that your kid loves doing, and you equip them to do it like crazy, by the time a kid is 9, you imagine how many hours of that. And it's at a formative time. So you're younger. We all know this to be true from just our own experience. And any of our viewers and listeners that have kids totally know this to be true. In your first years of life, you are learning massively faster. So much faster, and you're learning root things that almost get programmed into your skin and bones and blood, you know? And so the martial arts, if our kid was going to be a fighter, I mean, we don't know that. They might want to be, a firefighter. They might want to be something that doesn't exist right now. By the time I may have children in the next year or two, I'm hoping, in the next couple for sure. The 21 years from now, there'll be things that we can't even conceptualize. So you certainly can't say you're going to play football or you're going to, be a singer. You can't do that. But if you find something that they love, and with the martial arts, obviously we know it helps your learning, it helps goal setting, it helps, seeing the future and imagining growth and being driven and responsibility and, listening to authority and all of these things. It does all of these things. So imagine your 9-year-old has been studying that, a bit of structure with play, working it all in there if you have a good martial arts teacher. I want to mention my friend Tristan. He's on the Danforth. He is a karate instructor that has a lot of kids, the Danforth in Toronto. I will find the name of his school. It's a Goju Ryu karate school, but I've watched and talked to him about teaching kids, and it is fascinating. And I don't know if he totally understands just how much he's changed their lives, because my entire life was changed as one person sitting here because my parents took me to take martial arts as a kid. That is definitively true. And so he's changing Tristan Bell's martial arts. Duh. Bell's Martial Arts on the Danforth. If you have a kid and you live anywhere near Toronto, take them there. So with that in mind, I think the ideal, if you want to help your kids learn the physical skills, so again, the younger we acquire or try any skill, the more that base starts young, and that base is built on that. By the time you're 12, it isn't just like, I've been training something, I've been playing soccer. It's you achieved a novice level, and then you built on that, and then you learned things you don't even know. The kid couldn't even explain the things that they learned about goal setting and working towards things. The roots of payoff is so much more than, well, they won't get bullied. That's good too. That is going to be handy. Or, well, they'll be in good shape. Or it'll teach them discipline. That's also good. But it's so much more than that. But my opinion is that somewhere around 3 or 4, if there's any environment that your child can be in that allows some type of gymnastics. So, and maybe 3 is young. Maybe 4 or 5 sounds a little better. But there is sort of gymnastic type movements for children. Tuck your head and roll, or roll sideways, or jump up, or any. That's the root. That's the basics. I actually, Faraz has kids, and I have talked to him about this. And his sons, and I think he put them in wrestling first. Same thing. But gymnastics would be, that's what, as a child, I was fortunate enough to get to do as a little kid. And that's what I would tell you to do, is if you're in any scenario where the youngest possible that there is some type of generalized gymnastics training and your kid has any aptitude or interest in it whatsoever, that you put them in there as young as possible. The 2 things that are precursors for success is that type of training, gymnastics or wrestling, very young, and learning piano. There is some insane percentage of CEOs in North America right now who studied piano as a kid. The math just doesn't lie. So, and again, we're studying art, math, the study of piano improves the ability to do math. It improves the ability to understand art, which applies to moving your body. So we're not all programming the greatest martial artists in the world, or kids that, you don't over helicopter yourself as a parent to make your kids super successful. But if you have the ability to do gymnastics as a young child and piano, the math doesn't lie. It pays off. And then you do gymnastics, you get kid used to moving. Then when you put them in judo or karate or something at 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever they can handle, there's even younger, they just take to it like crazy. If you don't have some type of gymnastics or wrestling in where you live, but you have swimming, that's also the next thing. You move your body young, you learn to play piano young, your whole life, it improves every aspect of your life. But all I will say is, and hey, I now as an adult wish that my parents had made me continue piano as a kid, but they, you know what, you're still a human being, and really you want to overly push your kid too. You can't make people do stuff. You probably shouldn't. I don't know what I'll do in that situation, but I think I'll probably err on the side of encourage you to love it. My wife is in a musical right now called Kinky Boots touring America, and she is a high-level theater performer. And her parents literally were just like, find the thing that you love. And they put her in a lot of different things. She was very lucky. She was an only child with parents who really cared, and as I'm sure every parent does. And they just kept showing her things until she migrated to something. And as a little weirdo, cute kid, she moved towards singing and then stayed with that for life. So you can't, I think, on some level, we all know what we like. And I think as kids too, there'll be something. So you put some kids in water and that's all they want to do is swim. For me, there won't be a lot of rules in my house, probably the same ones as there is here. You have to improve, and you have to strive for something, and you have to search for growth. And the others will be like, no, you got to come to martial arts class with me. So that because it's my belief that it's made my life, everything good in my life can be traced. And that includes being a good enough man that my wife wanted to, fell in love with me. That means my job, the physical shape that I'm in, everything. My line of thinking, I connect it all to martial arts. And that's why I am so passionate about trying to share these ideas, because I believe that it is one of the roots of happiness. This is interesting, somewhat connected. Do the best coaches, and this is coach_Tommy. So if he is a coach, I'm sure he knows the answer to this, but like my friend Rick says, you got to ask the questions you know the answers to. I'm like, watch my interview with Rick on the on the Artists of Life thing. He's a fascinating guy, and I really like him. I've been spending a lot of time with him, and because he is different. But I'm like, why do I have to ask the questions I know the answers to? And the answer might be so that you can trap a guy, but and that'll be what's interesting about interviewing different people with different mindsets. The people who do deals and people who do a lot of business, that is its own form of combat. That is its own, and I think that's why I'm interested in talking to business people. Not because I'm going to necessarily use any of their philosophies, but in my nerdy, stupid little way, I'm going to interpret their deals and their negotiations and their conflicts in work. I'm going to probably start interpreting it as martial combat. That's weird. That's really weird. Do the best coaches you talk to have some common traits that make them great leaders? Sorry, I knocked over my record here. Do the best coaches you talk to have some common traits that make them great leaders? There's a lot going on in that question, actually. First, we have to decide what are the best coaches we talk to, and what does that mean? Who are the best coaches that I talk to? And what am I basing that criteria on? The best coaches are not necessarily the ones that we all know. Some of them definitely are. But the best coach, just that, we have to figure out what we mean by that. The most successful coaches are the coaches with the best fighters, or the coaches who, as we watch and assess the different skills that they have, the job of the coach is such a wild one. I was talking today to my friend, again, Jamil. He works he's a creative, and we were talking about that growth mindset. And I was telling him about, and I've mentioned this even in the last week, about that path of analysis. And as you're trying to achieve mastery in your life, which we're all at varying stages, we don't know what mastery is. We don't exactly know when we're there. I don't think. There's a great book literally called Mastery. Jamie, Rogan's guy, was reading it when I was down there for that Fight Companion, and I was about 80% through it. And it basically traces the paths of individuals through an apprenticeship phase and then a creative phase and all these different phases. And if you don't go and you don't gather information, you don't try and error, you try to push yourself or pretend or move yourself too fast, you're actually you won't be able to achieve mastery, which is why you have to keep that white belt mindset or reset that white belt mindset, that beginner mindset, so you can go back and keep relayering your learning. There are no gurus. There really aren't. And even if there is, even if your coach is a guru, he may only be a guru for another 6 months because he stopped learning. If you believe you're brilliant, you're done. Brilliant people don't need to improve. Great geniuses, if they believe that's what they are, don't need to put in the work that they put in to get there. What got you here is not the same thing that's going to get you to the next level. And that's why mastery is something that is always in the distance. Because even if you are a master of your thing now, the next level of mastery, that S curve that keeps going up, will push it further and you'll fall behind. So you have to constantly have a beginner mentality. But so let's take that concept. It's tough to figure out what our best coaches. That alone is a challenge. But what do they have some common traits that make them good leaders? So we'll talk about the leadership quality right now first. So for us is one of my favorite coaches, and there are many. I want to train with Matt Hume, and when he's training Demetrius, which is now, and I had reached out to him, but with this turbulence with, being starting our own YouTube channel and Fight Network closing down, I've let that slide for a couple of weeks. But I want to be basically immersed in their training as an observer and learn a bunch of new things. Matt Hume is my very favorite right now, watching the way he's working with Demetrius, and also where I know he is looking. But Firas is one of my very favorites. I loved chatting with him, and we end up in the same city sometimes, and I've had the good fortune to sit for a couple hours. he and myself, or he and I and Ramdeen. And so we get to share a whole bunch of different ideas. And so I've watched leadership, that aspect, which is different from coaching, which is different from knowledge, which is different from teaching, which is different from cornering. All these are different skills like punching and kicking and breathing and recovery and slipping your head and whatever. They're all different skills. But the leadership part of it, I've got to watch Firas a few times, and he's a great leader. Greg Jackson, of course, is a great leader. Duke is a great leader. There are so many of the ones that we see at the highest level. One of the things they all have in common is pretty solid leadership, and you know it when you feel you don't see it. So I am not one to pick on Edward Tarverdian because I haven't yet trained with him, and I want to train with him. Okay, but there have been moments that you have watched him cornering that you question the leadership in the moment. And so that's why he stands out to us. And that's why in those moments, when we are putting him alongside Duke or Matt or Firas or whoever, he stands out to us. Okay? And why does he stand out? Why do the others not? Because we feel, the feel that we get is that they're great leaders. There are moments in there, we can't imagine it, but there's moments in there. Anthony Pettis has a broken eye socket, and he has to do 20 more minutes. Takes a pretty special, and he's driven, and he's very special human being, but he requires great leadership at that point. George St. Pierre turned to Greg Jackson once and said, "I tore my groin," and Greg Jackson says, "Hit him with it." And that isn't just a coincidence. That is a very active order. It's not just saying you'll be okay. It's beyond that. It is making, and I think even recently somebody with a broken hand and the coach said, hit them with it. Dr. David Klonsky is a close friend, a professor at the University of British Columbia. We're working on a book together. I've been saying that for 2 years, and we've literally written like about 20 lines, but we're good friends and we want to do that. And he brought that up to me, in particular the Greg Jackson one, and he is a PhD professor of psychology, and it jumped out at him because of its active direction. Not just, don't worry, or ignore it, or you're going to be fine, or you got another round in you. Hit him with it, Hit him with it, with my groin, Also just like, and then we move on. All those are great leadership. But I'll give you, for the reason I mentioned for us, I'll give you a very good example. I've told this story before. And in fact, I've asked him on Fight Network, I sat down and asked him. So I was fighting my last fight in outside of Montreal. And I was fighting a guy, actually, his brother, Eamon, fought. And I know for us, it was like, geez, this is a tough fight for Robin. But he was very polite, and he was very encouraging, but never stepped over the line. He was perfect as a friend who is a coach, sharing a back room. I had my own coaching staff and team who I loved, and they coached perfectly, and that was the best fight I've ever had. And it was all great. But so Mandel Nallo is one of his great up-and-comers. And not only is he talented, but I called one of his fights in Regina where he got lambasted and dropped and came back to win calmly. And that's where you go, okay, Mandel, yeah, you got what it takes. But this was his first fight. And so I was fight number 2, and Mandel was fight number 1. So I was sitting back, and I was feeling pretty good about things, which I didn't always do. And I was in a good state of mind to be able to observe Firas and Mandel. I didn't ask about it that night. I asked about it like months later, but it was interesting enough that it stayed with me. So Mandel's all wound up, super talented, and he's raring to go because it's your first fight. It's a big deal. Every fight is a big deal. I was backstage for another fight. Joe Dirksen was fighting fight number 64, and I was like, dude, I don't really feel my hands like tingling. And he goes, yeah, I got it too. Fight number 64. And you're like, oh, wow. I'll never experience that. And, oh, no way. Fight number 6. But the difference is Joe has felt that 63 times. And plus all the fights that didn't get recorded on SureDog. And he's had perfect, brilliant performances feeling that. So then it's normal. It's still there. You're still going to experience it, but it's a normal It's a normal experience. And somehow knowing, because basically what I'm asking is, I mean, will I be able, like, you're not sure if you have your full strength. Your physiological experience in the 20 minutes before combat is, or even an hour or two before combat is very strange. So if you don't understand, what if this is a problem? Joe's like, that's not a problem. I get it every time. You know what I mean? But so Mandel is new and he is revved up and he's fighting my friend Joe, actually. Good dude. And Joe had at least 3 or 4 wins, and I'm going to say maybe 6 or 7 fights. And Joe was a tough opponent, and Mandel was a super skilled guy. But so Firas brings him over, and he goes up to Mandel and he touches like, hey, Mandel, I got to tell you, he's got a big smile on his face, big enough smile that, and I'm observing this at the time. It was a great distraction, in fact, because of my weird curiosity. It was interesting enough that I concentrated on that for a few moments and took my mind off. And he's like, so Mandel, I got to tell you, and just the right amount of smirk, so you know what he's saying now is not actually true. Yeah, they canceled your opponent. Yeah, he's gone. I got a different guy in, Mandel. He's 8 feet tall. And he's a black belt in every martial art. He's a black belt in karate. He's a black belt in judo. He is a Muay Thai world champion. He's huge and he's powerful. I sparred with him once and he dropped me. And Mandel's smiling goes, yeah? He goes, yeah. And Jiu-Jitsu world champion. And he pours it on. Mandel's smiling and he goes, nah, just kidding. It's the same guy. And then just kind of walks away. Now, what did he do there? What did he do? He just elevated the pressure and the stress and the reality and the weird, and then brought it down. Oh, he's what? No, he's a world. He beat you. Nah, he's just a regular guy. Don't worry about it. That was a fascinating little leadership moment there. And I asked him if he had used that tool before, and he said, not that exact tool. He said, but sometimes your guy's too revved up. It's too wild. And in fact, to be honest, Mandel went out and he just went for it. And I've talked to him about it since. He unloaded everything and he took Joe out in minute and a half, 2 minutes. If Joe survived that moment and circled off the cage, Mandel was in trouble because he didn't take a breath that whole time and he just went for it. But maybe that little bit for us brought him back was just enough. But then I talked to Firas about it and he said, in some times, especially newer guys, they're too chilled. It's like, hey, dude, there's a fucking fight about to happen. And he has to make them realize that this is serious business too. So that little understanding, that was an example of great leadership that I saw. And it was really neat because these are, whether we're saying that life is their art, and that's what we believe here, they're adventuring through life in a way that with a bit of leadership here and a little bit of letting you go on your own here and a little bit of taking the risk that as a proud dad or coach or whatever, this is dangerous, but I got to let them do it. All of that is great, great leadership. And, but we can talk about coaching for a long time. There's so many parts of this conversation. And, definitely send me some more questions about coaching. It's something I'm fascinated in. As you go from studying fighters and understanding what they do and studying technique, use a big stop and a revisit along the way of studying the martial arts and analyzing the martial arts for a lifetime is continually checking in and seeing what we can learn from the coaches, seeing what we can learn from how they work. Their job is a performance too. Do you know what I mean? They're not just along for the ride. If their performance, their ability to express ideas, their ability to lead, their ability to be in that moment, by the time you get back to that corner, you might have 51 seconds left. If that coach isn't on his game, performance-wise, not just knowledge, not just leadership, performance, ability to get your ideas out, ability to be in the moment, to express the concepts, the emotion, share the idea. If you're not on, you let your guy down. And so there's a performance there too. So we'll talk a lot about coaching in the next while. It is fascinating. I'm glad you brought that up. You just have, sent me down a curious path on coaching as well. So that is really cool. What else do we got? We got a couple other, so many good things. Akasambo, could you please save the rest of these questions for next time? Oh, there's a question about KSW too. I'm going to talk about So KSW is doing a show in a stadium in May. We'll talk. If you got any KSW questions about that show, I definitely want to talk about that. There's been some conversation about me and Ramdeen contributing some kind of commentary or analysis for that. Trust, or like live real-time breakdowns or whatever. KSW, I am in a stadium. That show, unreal. But we'll talk about that next time. Akasomba, please share save these. We got some Connor Floyd stuff. And we got if you did a Robin Black breakdown of your life next year, what would it look like? I'll answer that next week. We'll finish off on this one because it's relevant to recent and to youth and stuff. And I have some thoughts on it that I find interesting. I hope you find them interesting. And then we'll black out for a bit. Big Nick's 129 or Big Nick, sorry, 129. What are your thoughts on UFC newcomer Mark Diakisi? I hope that's how you say it, Diakisi. John Gooden is a brilliant commentator, but John Anik's my guy when it comes to pronunciations. If you hear John Anik say it a certain way, it is 100% correct because the study and preparation, and I'm sure he has it phonetically written out. I'm sure Gooden, my man Gooden as well, but he also has an accent. So with his accent, it could just be a little different. But Diakisi, newcomer Mark Diakisi, his striking was amazing on Saturday. Okay, I agree. It was really cool. But what you witnessed, so we need to see, the exciting thing when you see guys like this is you're like, oh yeah, they're 2 levels above this level. And that is what now we saw that with Cody Garbrandt coming up. I didn't believe it, didn't quite believe it. I'm like, he's not fighting Dominic Cruz. Well, you need to see them come up. And these young guys are moving on such a level. Of course, Connor comes up, takes out the first guy, takes out the second. You're like, oh, you just got to keep seeing them against higher and higher levels. All we learned from Diakisi on the weekend is that he's way above this level. And he was so much above this level that it was literally just push, 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 especially with the fancy stuff. And my early breakdowns of McGregor was we managed the range, and this is 2-3 years ago. And now they're all doing it. We manage the range, control the distance. When we go to push towards you, we use the flim-flam. Crazy stuff, flipping, moving, angles, whatever, flim-flam. Overload your CPU with things that are a little bit overwhelming and pressured, mostly to make you react this way. Once we back out to our range again, you as a lower level guy to the Akisi or Connor in that case, or Wonder Boy, and even he even did it to Hendricks. Same idea. Flim flam, distance, flim flam, overload you a little bit. When you go to fight back, because inevitably you do, there's this natural underlying tone to a lower level guy that, okay, I handled your shit. Now it's my turn. Drop back, pull, bam. That's what Connor did in his first bunch of fights. He pressure, distance control, play with the range, make it a range that you want and that you can control when and where you come in. Use spinning kicks, turning kicks, all kinds of pressure, weird stuff, intense stuff. I call it the flim flam. And then when it's your time, pull and boom. And that's what he did. Go back and watch it. And it was beautiful. I'm a fan. And he's got that heat, he's got that kind of like sizzle in that. And that's real. That isn't just a thing. That's a part of that artist, that sizzle, and I like it. But until we see him against somebody who can fight back at his level, all we saw is he's way above that. Because when you're way above something, and you'll see it more, there's going to be plenty of them. We've seen lots of striking backing up ever since, the last 3 years has become mandatory. It was a reaction to the pressure fighting game of Aldo, Barao, Verdum, and Rafael Dos Anjos. We push forward. As we're pushing forward, you're retreating, covering up. You get kicked in the legs. If you try a single, we beat you up for it. You don't know what to do when you retreat. And Aldo mastered that game, and you couldn't do nothing about it. And people are like, oh, okay, well, Sean Tompkins, when Mark Hominick was going to fight Aldo, Tompkins years back understood that game. He understood it years ago. Rest in peace, Sean. It was his birthday last week. Great man. He was a really great man. And I got to stay at their house for a couple of days and watch him training Mark for that fight, which was a real gift. I learned a lot there. And Mark's always been one of my favorite fighters. And they knew it. They knew what it was. And Mark won round 5. But he was really prepared for it. But knowing what it is, understanding it, figuring out what you believe the answer was, and Sean knew. And Mark was one of the great fighters in the world. And don't ever doubt that. There are guys that were in that era that were so good. Whether they were the champion or they, won this fight or lost that fight is not relevant. We were studying fighting in that era, and Mark Hominick was as good as it got. But they couldn't do anything about it. Barao was, what are you in, like, I don't know, 138 fights. Like, he just everyone understood it. So you had to develop that game. Duke calls it the anchor punch. There's tons of different names for it. Retreat, plant, boom. Stipe Miocic took out Verdum with it because Verdum, RDA, all of a sudden RDA was running and pressuring against my man Eddie Alvarez. I mean, the answer had to be developed. You had to develop, or else what are we going to do? Just go, well, I guess these guys are the champs forever. No, you got to figure out the answer. You got to find the answer. So the answer now is that. And Diakisi, young man, is really good at that, as are many, many, many people. And the issue is when somebody of his level, and he draws back to just land at whether you call it the anchor punch, you call it the planting punch, you call it, there's the stomp punch. Stomp uppercut is another good one. We're not seeing a lot yet, but if you draw a guy in deep, there's a little stomp. It's not just a place and direction change. There's a stomp to it. But you can't do that. Magicians can't trick other magicians. You know what I mean? Somebody does a sleight of hand with me, pick a card, any card. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. You got my card. Try that to another magician. He's like, are you kidding me? You're not going to get me with that. And so that's why we have to see this kid against another one of these guys. The thing is, I think he's going to be special. I think he could be a top 10 looking guy, but there's a lot of really good people out there. TKO, it's either April 6th or 7th. I'm not sure. It's live on Fight Pass and in Canada on Fight Network. And there's a lot of hot prospects that we call there. And the thing you realize is as you speak to each of these prospects, their teams and their coaches, they're all like, you never seen anything like this, except for there's one in Brazil and there's one in Japan and there's one in Windsor, Ontario, or 2 in Windsor, Ontario, and there's one in Oshawa, and there's 2 in the Midwest, and there's 2 in Vegas, and they're all that good. And so they have to fight each other. And only the ones that do fight each other and get the results, the learning, the compensate, like the overcoming setbacks when they do lose those fights, they're going to be the champions of the world one day. The ones who try to pad their record in a world of this many guys are going to get murdered. That's a conversation for another day. But by the time you get to these 12 and 0 guys who never fought anybody tough, those guys are in a lot of trouble in a year from now. They're in a lot of trouble now. We all know examples of them. Some have got to the UFC and some have, not, but you got to take tough fights today. How long was that, Mark? Hour 17. That's not so bad. I've done 2 hours before of this show. But it's been a really fun 8 days. It feels like 2 months in a good way, in a real exciting, creative, risk-taking, try and grow, and it's been great. I'll tell you guys about it tomorrow. I'll tell you if you're watching this later, check out Fighting is About Fighting episode 2, and I'll talk about bring you in on what the documenting our journey. And thanks for hanging out with me. Probably within a week, we'll do another one of these. So keep those questions coming. I only get to 6 or 8 of them these days, but I really appreciate them nonetheless. And thanks for all the love. Blackout.